Hey, ladies. Regina Phillips here, and I am back with another episode of Kingdom Car Chronicles. We have been graced to see another week, y'all. Yesterday was Palm Sunday, and this week is giving us a great opportunity to reflect on the life of Jesus Christ and also his journey on the road to the cross for us. So I pray that you guys take some time to reflect on that and just be grateful for where we are. So y'all, we've been talking about spiritual warfare in a nutshell. Of course, we've had different topics starting April 1st, last Wednesday. But we've been talking about spiritual warfare. So we've talked about what it is, who's involved for the most part. There are still some things that I'll be sharing about that, why we're in spiritual warfare. And today we're going to talk about where this spiritual warfare happens. So the topic for today is it's all in your head. It's all in your head. So just to kind of recap what spiritual warfare is, I gave you the definition. We're wrestling in an unseen realm against persons without bodies or spirits. Ephesians 6:12 tells us what those four different things are. Number one, it is not flesh and blood. So it's not the people that we see. It's not those that we can see with our natural eye. But it is principalities, it's powers, world rulers, and spiritual wickedness in the heavenlies. Who we're wrestling against is persons without bodies or demonic evil spirits, not to be confused with fallen angels or those who fell with Satan, which we will talk about later. And then we talked about why. Simply put, Satan hates us. And the position that we're in as children of God, we're a direct threat to Satan and his kingdom to keep others from coming to the knowledge of who God is. He wants your soul. He wants to destroy your witness with respect to your marriage, family, friends, and most definitely the church. And he wants to kill, steal, and destroy you. So those are the what, who, and why of spiritual warfare. And today we're going to talk about where. So just as the title says, it's all in your head. The battle starts in our minds. So y'all, I have several videos that I've uploaded dealing with our thought life, which affects our verbiage, which sets into motion the trajectory of our life. So our thoughts are the root. Our thoughts are the root of every word and every deed. So we know that life and death lays in the power of the tongue. And so everything that we say is required to manifest, because word is spirit, word has power. So we have to be careful what we say, but in order to be mindful of what we're saying, we have to be mindful of our thoughts. So knowing this, why wouldn't the enemy wage war on our minds? Why wouldn't he, if he knows that everything we say and do first starts with the thought? Isaiah 55:8 says, our thoughts are not his thoughts, meaning God's. Our thoughts are not God's thoughts. But God's word gives us the greatest example of how he thinks. We must choose to examine our thoughts in light of God's word. And we also have to be willing to submit our thoughts to his thoughts. But we have to be in God's word to be able to do that. So how does all of this apply to spiritual warfare? Let's look at 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 4-5. And I'm going to paraphrase verse 4 and hang on chapter 5. So verse 4 tells us, and we're going to come back to this in a later video, but it tells us that the weapons of our warfare, they're not physical, they're not carnal, but they're mighty in God to the pulling down of strongholds, or to destroy strongholds. Verse number 5 tells us, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. So we know that when we think about something, we don't think in words. We think in pictures. And so imaginations are those pictures in our mind that we think that we're thinking about, or that we see and we dwell on, and we see it played out in our heads. eventually those pictures become words, and those words become actions. But when those pictures exalt itself against the knowledge of God, we are called as children of God to cast those pictures or imaginations down. Through strategy and cunning deceit, Satan attempts to set up strongholds in our minds. And so what is a stronghold? A stronghold, and I'm going to give you several different definitions, but a stronghold is an area in which we are held in bondage due to a wrong way of thinking. An area in which we're held in bondage due to a wrong way of thinking. Okay, another definition is a place where a particular cause or belief is strongly defended or upheld. A stronghold is also that fourth force we're fighting in this battle, according to Ephesians 6 and 12. That spiritual wickedness in high places. But let's take note of verse 5, the King James Version of verse 5 in 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse number 5. It says, casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God. Every high thing, spiritual wickedness in high places, according to the King James Version. So what or who would acknowledge itself against the knowledge of God? Who would do that? What would do that? Evil spirits, the enemy, Satan, exalts itself against the knowledge of God. We know that he wants to distort everything about Christ. Everything in God's word in his kingdom is a replica, but a distorted replica of who God is and what he does for his people. So, of course, the enemy would exalt himself or try to exalt himself against the knowledge of God. And he does that through pictures in our minds. This stronghold is also a recurring pattern. So something that you keep coming back to, a recycle being repeated in your life, something that you can't seem to shake can be a stronghold, a sin that you can't overcome. So those are the definitions of a stronghold. I want to talk to you now about 5 key areas the enemy uses to set up strongholds. We're not going to go into great detail in this video about those areas, but I do want to touch on them. And no, this is not an exhaustive list. This is not all-inclusive, but these areas are can cover quite a bit of things that we experience in our lives, really most of everything that we experience. So 5 key areas the enemy uses to set up strongholds. The first area he uses is unconfessed or unrepented sin. Unconfessed or unrepented sin. I want to say here, and I'm not going into detail about this because, like I said, we're going to do it in a later video, but abstinence or well-managed sin does not mean that you've been set free from that thing. It doesn't mean that you've been delivered if you're able to abstain and still desire, or you can manage it pretty well. That doesn't mean that you've been set free. Okay, so we'll go into more detail about that later. The second thing the enemy uses to set up strongholds in our lives is occult activity. Occult activity. And I'll just say here, Lord Jesus, you would be surprised. You would be flabbergasted at what all encompasses occult activity. We're not going to talk about it in this video, but we'll get to it. The third thing is lies that you've believed. We know who the father of lies is. Satan is the father of lies. The fourth thing is unforgiveness. And then the fifth thing is heritage or lineage. Things passed down to us both physically and spiritually. So these are the areas, for the most part, that the enemy can use to set up strongholds in our minds. And it's, if you think about it, it's a form of oppression. So we must examine what's in our minds, and if it doesn't agree with God's word, then we have to cast it down. And to cast something down, you have to open up your mouth and cast it down. And I'm getting into how a little bit, but you have to open up your mouth and you have to cast it down. You can't fight thought with thought. You have to open up your mouth and stop that image from going in your head. And we'll get into more detail about that in the how. But we have to examine our thoughts, y'all. I want to encourage you to make sure you are being mindful of what you're thinking. Think about what you're thinking about. Is this something that gives God glory? Is this something that's exalting itself against God's knowledge? And I'm taking it to be my truth. You must know God's word, though, in order to compare if what you're thinking goes against the knowledge of who God is. You have to know his word. You have to get in his word to be able to do that. Psalms 99 tells us that the Lord also will be a refuge and a high tower for the oppressed. So we know that strongholds are a form of oppression, but the Lord will be a refuge and a high tower for the oppressed, a refuge and a stronghold. So God himself can be a stronghold, and we know that a stronghold is a place where a particular cause or belief is strongly defended or upheld. So a stronghold doesn't always have to be a bad thing, but for us, with respect to spiritual warfare, 9 times out of 10 it is a bad thing. But again, go and study that for yourself. Psalms 99, the Lord also will be a refuge and a high tower for the oppressed, a refuge and a stronghold in times of trouble. So I simply want to encourage you guys, think about what you're thinking about. The battle starts in our minds. And if we're not able to transform our minds with the knowledge of God and his word, then the enemy uses our mind to wage war against us, because it starts there. And then it becomes a word, or it becomes words, and then action. So I encourage you, ladies, to think about what you're thinking about. And if it exalts itself against the knowledge of God, cast it down. Open up your mouth, cast it down, and speak what God's word says about whatever that thought is. Y'all, I pray that this has been an encouragement to you. When we come back, we will be discussing. We talked about where today, so we'll be talking about when. We may get into how, but if you can see, all of these kind of blend together. Y'all, I'm trying to break it down as much as I can and not give you guys too much information at one time, but it's so exciting. It's hard to kind of hold back and keep for the next video. But anyway, I look forward to coming back with you guys on Wednesday so that we can continue this. I hope it's blessing you. And if you don't remember anything else, please remember that I love you. God bless. Hey there, thank you so much for watching this video. I pray that it was a blessing to you. And if it was, please hit the like button, and don't forget to share with someone that you know that it would also be a blessing to. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you want to be notified when I upload new content, hit the little bell next to the subscribe button. Again, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to sharing more with you. God bless.